Welcome to the ECE section of YCYS Hong Kong. YCYS was founded in 1932 by Madam Tang Cho-hang. Her daughter, Dr. Betty Chan, has continued to build on her legacy, introducing and pioneering play-based education in Hong Kong. We are a through-trained school, with families naturally progressing from our ECE section to our primary school section, and thereafter our secondary school. Please join us as some of our ECE teachers and leaders take you on a tour and a glimpse into more of who we are at YCYS.
Yew Chung嘅教育核心目的就係話培養小朋友嘅品德。我哋會同家長一齊合作，為小朋友嘅成長而努力。所以我哋好重視小朋友佢哋嘅良好關係。我哋嘅老師同小朋友係好密切嘅，佢哋一齊喺課室裏邊玩啦，同埋探索啦，建構佢哋嘅知識。陳寶瓊校監去建立咗耀中幼教學園，為咗幼兒教育能夠培訓一啲良好優質嘅老師，將幼兒教育貫徹始終，讓我哋嘅小朋友能夠有一個好好嘅學習基礎。咁大家就嚟我哋學校睇一睇，究竟小朋友點樣好開心咁樣去享受佢哋嘅活動學習啊！
We follow emergent curriculum at YCYS, which allows children to explore, investigate, create, and communicate their ideas.
Core to our program is our belief that every child is unique and different, and that we value and respect them for who they are.
我哋相信小朋友嘅能力，盡量俾佢哋嘗試做能力做到嘅事，同埋接受新嘅挑戰。咁樣小朋友就能夠自信咁樣進行探索。
我哋同樣重視小朋友獨特嘅個性，喺尊重嘅前提下，我哋接納小朋友唔同嘅情緒，透過觀察同埋聆聽，去了解佢哋行為背後嘅意思，幫助佢哋認識同埋接納自己，建立正向嘅社交態度。
每個小朋友都有佢自己獨特嘅發展進程。因此，老師會花時間去觀察佢哋嘅發展階段同埋個別興趣，從而進一步支援同埋應教佢哋唔同範疇嘅學習。
Learning is documented in a number of ways. Teachers take deep observations of children engaging in play, and together as a teaching team, collaborate on their reflections to create authentic responses and extend the learning of all individual children.
On our Kowloon Chong campuses, we're really privileged to have well-provisioned and planned outdoor spaces where our children can freely explore. These spaces are for children to develop their motor skills, but also just to extend their learning from the classroom in other areas of play.
老師經常以環境作為第三位老師，包括室內同埋室外嘅環境。我哋會創意咁樣利用開放式嘅物料去吸引小朋友學習。
我哋尊重每位小朋友，因此環境係根據觀察小朋友嘅興趣而佈置嘅，使佢哋更投入探索。過程中可以培養佢哋解決問題嘅能力、創造力同埋協作能力等等。
Our environments are designed to engage children of all ages. They promote relationships, communication, collaboration, and exploration through play. The environments here at Yew Chung respond to children's interests through the way they are laid out. If a child has an interest in something in particular, we will ensure there are provocations set up to extend children's curiosity and that interest. These interests often lead to many learning opportunities that teachers can facilitate.
We have developed a unique caregiver connection program for parents, caregivers, and family members that come to school with the child. Every member of our classroom is part of our learning community.
耀中嬰幼兒學習課程係照顧者同小朋友共同學習嘅地方，
而成人呢就會從老師嘅直接指導同埋書本嘅啟發中學習一啲恰當嘅方法嚟到促進小朋友嘅健康成長，啟發佢哋嘅學習。
我哋相信咧，家庭係小朋友咧成長嘅重要基石。咁所以我哋咧用咗唔同嘅平台咧嚟照顧家庭裏邊唔同嘅人，讓佢哋喺當中裏邊咧去認識自己，甚至乎將自己嗰個經驗咧去彼此分享，彼此嚟到去聆聽，從中咧去獲得支持同埋關心。
We've developed our school community platforms to be a place where we can support parents and caregivers through their journey of parenting young children. We've developed platforms that include book clubs in different languages, fellowships for parents and caregivers, as well as caregiver courses.
家長亦都係呢個課程嘅重要資源之一。我哋咧會同家長分享小朋友嘅觀察，從而獲得更多嘅資料，去了解小朋友嘅興趣發展，為小朋友創造更適切嘅學習經驗。
Building trust is something that we really value in our program. We offer separation workshops to support families in developing consistent goodbye routines for children to feel safe and secure as they start to connect and build strong relationships with their class teachers.
喺我哋每一班裏面咧，都會有本地同埋外籍老師嘅。雖然咧佢哋係嚟自唔同嘅國家，但係喺課室裏面咧，佢哋嘅地位咧都係同等嘅，同埋有好緊密嘅合作關係。喺課室裏面，佢哋係需要咧去共同觀察小朋友，同埋之後咧去討論點樣去延伸同埋回應小朋友興趣。
Yew Chung is a multicultural and bilingual environment. Children have the opportunity to use English and Chinese throughout the day. There's no set time limit. Because they are constantly exposed to the languages, it happens in a really natural and emergent way.
Children love school at YCYS. Each day we have the privilege of seeing young children learn, create, problem solve, and explore the world around them. YCYS Hong Kong YCYW is a team of passionate, caring, kind, and expert teachers who are guided by our values of the unique child, stimulating and supportive learning environments, character development, and holistic education, which are all implemented through our YCYS play-based and emerging curriculum program.
Good evening, parents, staff, and friends of Yew Chung and UR schools. It is our pleasure to welcome you this evening to the 7th episode in our parent webinar series. The presentation will be in English, but for Chinese, you can simply switch to the Chinese translation using the language button on your screen. 各位耀中耀华学校的家长、老师和朋友们，大家晚上好。今晚我们很荣幸邀请到您前来参加我们耀中耀华家校网络研讨会系列的第7场线上直播讲座。演讲全程将以英文进行，您也可以点击屏幕下方的中文按钮，切换到中文频道，收听中文翻译。This evening's topic is the Yew Chung approach to early childhood education, which follows on well from our last webinar on the topic of play. My name is Carol Mao, Parent Relations Officer at YCYS Hong Kong, and I will be your host for the webinar. We are delighted to welcome Mr. Clayton Mullins to present on this topic this evening. As the Western Co-Principal of Early Childhood Education in Yew Chung International School of Hong Kong, Clayton is a strong believer in lifelong and holistic education and an advocate for quality childhood education in a child's formative years. At YCYW, we have created engaging environments based on our organization first established 90 years ago in 1932 by Madame Zhang Chouhang. This was further enhanced by our CEO cum school supervisor, Dr. Betty Chen Po-King, who has continued to build on the early foundations set up by her mother. Dr. Chen proposed the concept of environment, interaction, evolution, suggesting that within each environment, we can find dynamic interactions and ever-evolving changes to the individuals. As educators, we do our best to create an ideal environment where learning can be rich, authentic, and effective. This belief has enabled YCYW to lead the way in early childhood education. We also embrace the 12 values, which are at the heart of our Yew Chung UR culture, environment, and approach to education. These values inform our educational routines and highlight the environment that we strive to create for our schools. As usual, we will hold a Q&A session towards the end of the presentation. So please feel free to leave any questions that you might have, and Clayton will answer some of them after his presentation. We will also try to reply to your questions in the chat room as best as we can. It is time now to hear from our presenter, Mr. Clayton Mullins.
Good evening and welcome to our webinar. as we speak about the Yew Chung approach to early childhood education. A subject where we'll look into the values that really support the culture and environment that we have across our Yew Chung UR schools, that really start in early years but expand across different sections of the school. If I had to show a logo of Nike or Adidas, both of these companies work in the same industry, but as I showed them, you would probably have different feelings and thoughts towards each of these. Each of these is a unique company with its own branding. Now, they are in the same industry, but they have their own culture. The same for Apple or Samsung, both of them working with technology, but each of them has their distinct culture. And when you look at those logos, you start to have thoughts associated with those companies. So for us at Yew Chung UR, if I had to show our logo now, what is it that makes us unique? What is it that we think when we see these logos? What is it that we associate with Yew Chung UR? For us, we have a very long history that started in 1932 by Madam Tsang Cho-hang, and she really was the starting point for the culture that we have here at Yew Chung UR. You can see inside this image of her standing and showing the relationships that she has with children, and we know that she would every day be down at the gate greeting families and children into school at 7:30, and really set the tone for the type of environments that we have here at Yew Chung UR. Dr. Betty Chan, her daughter, our school CEO, continued to really build on this legacy and expand it across many cities to Silicon Valley, Shanghai, Beijing, Qingdao, Chongqing, and many other cities. And we really have developed into an organization that is pioneering in education, an elite organization that really is at the forefront of education. And Dr. Chan in the 70s came to Hong Kong with profound insight from her studies that she brought into this Asian context and continued to really pioneer. And in another conversation, we could talk about the work that she has done and the accolades that she has for this work that she's done. Dr. Stephanie Sanders Smith came to Hong Kong into our environment here, and she is a professor from the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, and she did research which was really hands-on, looking into the work that Dr. Chan and Madam Tsang Cho-hang had started, but has really been built on by generations of Yew Chung UR educators. And her task was to identify what is it that makes our organization unique. What is it that is building into our culture, the environments that we have? And through this process, 12 different values were identified, and our CPTD team has continued to work on this project. And the values cover 4 distinct different sections: students, relationships, learning and teaching, and language. And in Dr. Chan's words, these are an outcome of our organization environment and is the result of our dedication in education. They are a distillation of Yew Chung's 90 years of development that began with Madam Tsang and continued on with Dr. Chan and the many different educators. So what we're going to do is take some time to unpack what these look like, and in the way that I expressed earlier, that you might have Apple or Samsung or Nike or Adidas, we have our distinct culture, and what are those things that are supporting the intentionality behind this culture. Starting off with the first 2 values that really look at students or the children. What we're looking at is, who is the child? We're trying to understand their identity. And if we're able to be on the same page with how we view children, it really sets us up as a platform to be able to build upon that with all the other different values that come. So as this talk is really focused on the early childhood context, it's it's a great place to start to look at who the child really is. There's been a lot of research that has been done, specifically looking at neuroscience and understanding the brain. So this chart over here really shows us insight into the type of development that's happening in the young child. And we can see that the highest point on these curves of development are happening even before a child is a year of age, but significantly up to 5 years of age. It's showing that there's a whole lot of development that's happening in young children, and this has really helped us to shape the understanding we have about who the young child is. It's really enhanced by this research that's come out from Harvard, where if you have a look at the first of those images at birth, there are only a few neural connections, these pathways that have been formed in the mind. But over the first 6 years, you can just see how those pathways have really increased. They say that up to 1 million new neural connections are being formed every second. And it's really significant for us to understand the type of learning and development that's happening even in the youngest child. And all of this is helping to shape our understanding of the children that we are working with. Research, again from Harvard, has indicated that by the time a child is 3 years of age, that 90% of their brain has developed. And then they've spoken about the quality of relationships and learning environments that are actually supporting the development of the child, setting them up for future learning and development going off. It really is an impactful time. And what is significant for us is we need to have the same lenses. If you had to think of a pair of glasses, and all of us across Yew Chung, from our office staff to our teachers, to our leaders, to our judges, our IEs, families, we're all looking at who students are through the same lenses. And what we're seeing is that even young children are at a time in life where there is significant learning. And we know that the image that we have for students is that they are born learners. They are seeking to communicate, that they are creative explorers, constantly making connections. They have this internal drive and motivation to learn. And as we all look with the same lenses on, it helps us to ensure that we are starting at the same place. And the two values that come across there is that students are worthy of our respect and admiration, and that they are capable and can be trusted. And we know that in our mission principles and practices that we believe that each child is unique with innate talents and gifts that should be nurtured to the fullest potential. So it's from this starting point of understanding who these children or who these students are that we're working with that we get to build upon that. And the second part that we look at is relationships. From that platform, we look at the different types of relationships that we have at Yew Chung. And Dr. Chan has really expressed that we have a people-centered approach, which is a network of relationships. And we have a look at the values through 3, 4, and 5, where it's the learning community members work together as equals. And then teachers develop strong relationships with students and support these relationships between them. And schools build strong partnerships with home. As we look deeper into the value 3, for us in our early years environment, we have a co-teaching model with a Western and Chinese teacher that are in the class. And the emphasis is really on equals, because we're in an environment where we need to listen to each other, where we need to work together in this partnership. We're trying to understand different perspectives from the East and the West. And through this, we're really modeling this environment that comes through into the classrooms. And our learning community goes much wider. It goes into the work that we have with our judges, and you'll see them in our classrooms, I think called IEs across some of our other schools. And they also contribute significantly to the learning community that we have. Interestingly, the environment that we have at Yew Chung is really impactful on our teachers. I just remember this story quite recently where one of our teachers, a Chinese teacher, has been with us now for 3 years. She was commenting, saying that her friends and family were saying that there was something different about her. when she was at home, they said, there's something a little bit different about you. You are more friendlier, you listening more, you are calmer, there's something that has changed. What could it be? And our teacher said to the family members that, in her words, she had been working at this new school, Yew Chung in Hong Kong, and being in this environment had done something. It started transforming her. She started seeing relationships differently, the way that she saw her colleagues interacting amongst each other, the way that they were interacting with the children inside the school environment. And she started seeing a change in her own behavior, the way that she was interacting with others around her. And just so amazing for her to reflect and to be able to feed back to us on this journey is that people in our environment, not only are the children and the students, but also the teachers, are continually changing and being positively impacted by this environment that we have here at Yew Chung UR. Value 4, we look at teachers develop strong relationships with students and support relationships between them. And part of our MPP, our mission, principles and practices, is that quality student-teacher relationships are at the heart of meaningful engagement, leading to highly effective learning and teaching. We know that if we don't have high quality relationships, that students don't feel that sense of security, they don't feel that sense of belonging, and that ultimately leads to ineffective learning. Once children feel safe, they feel connected, they feel valued, that they're empowered to be able to go and engage in the teaching and learning that is so important for them. There are a number of specific skills that we use to support relationships between children. We know that if we can support them to develop conflict management, problem solving, that we're really empowering them not only for their childhood but going up into their adulthood, to be able to solve conflict, to be able to speak to other people, to be able to communicate. And in doing this, we've done a lot of work with Daniel Siegel, understanding the child's mind and what's happening inside the mind. He has this illustration, for example, that shows an upstairs of a house and a downstairs. And he really shares that this is what the brain looks like. And the upstairs part is where we have planning, we have thinking. It's our prefrontal cortex where there's a lot of higher order functioning that's going on there. But downstairs you have this part of the brain that is more instinctual. This is where we have anger or breathing, fear or blinking. And he speaks about a process of children, when their mind is working properly, it's that house is all together, and that top part of the house is like a hand that is clenched in a fist, and the top part is really working well, and that means that a child is able to engage in that higher order thinking. But like a pot that heats up, they say that when this bottom part of the house, that anger, the fear, the frustration, when that starts to really boil and bubble up, that it can really get really hot and flip. If you had to look at the steam pots as you light up that and boil the water, that eventually the steam becomes so hot that it makes the lid pop up, and as it pops up you would hear the sound of a whistle blowing coming out. And that's really what happens with a child in their mind, is that they're in this process of really developing that higher order thinking, but as that energy, that all of that sort of turmoil, those emotions bubble up, that the childs are going in and out of this process of their mind, that higher order thinking not being able to be engaged. And we do a lot of work in helping children understand that process, especially the children that are a little bit older, understanding what is happening inside their own minds. We then also spend a lot of time supporting children in different types of skills that they can use to understand the context that they're in, how to problem solve. And we want to ensure that children that they are supported in a safe environment, so that we don't have children running to teachers all the time, but they have the skills needed. So when they're out in the playgrounds, that they're able to resolve these conflicts and have these discussions. And these are conversations that we could go so deeply into, helping children understand what's happening in their mind, helping them with skills that are valuable for them to be able to process what is happening. There's actually some really interesting research that's come out from some Fortune 500 companies where they're looking and saying, what is it that you feel is missing with employees in your companies? And the thing that came up over and over again in this research was it really was emotional intelligence. And when they dug deeper into that, they looked at the inability for some of these employees to be able to understand the emotions, those feelings that they were feeling, and to be able to name them appropriately, which would then allow them to be able to work through that process and to be able to come back to a state that they were able to work well again. And in our environment, we've really taken emotional intelligence to heart, where we spend a lot of time helping children understand the different feelings that they're feeling. We know that feelings are okay, but the behaviors, the way that we respond, not all of those are okay. And we create environments where we have healthy boundaries, where children are learning more and more about the different feelings that they feel and understanding what those are and maybe where they came from and how they can work through those. As we build on with Value 5, we look at schools build strong partnerships with home. And in all that we do, we need to partner with families. We know that families are such an integral part of every single child's learning journey. And it's not only families, it's the whole home. It's parents, but it's grandparents, and it's the IEs, and it's the whole community that is speaking into the lives and supporting every child. We do a lot of work with families, and we really value the input that families have. And honestly, this journey of education, it is not complete without the input and the work that we do with families. We have a lot of different book clubs, different platforms, workshops, fellowships, many different opportunities for families to engage and to be connected with us. We really value parents that come into our classrooms and to share their skills with us and with the children around us. And we know that when there's consistency between home and school, that this is really powerful in ensuring that children are experiencing the same in different environments, whether home, at school. There's the same messages, the same consistency. There's this real partnership that's going on, and that gives such a sound message to children as they know that the parents and the school are working together with this consistency. So as we've built on with students and now relationships, and we get to move up to learning and teaching. And for us, we've got students learn through an emergent curriculum approach. Teachers and students construct learning together, and students are self-directed, responsible learners. As we look at the first one, it's really this approach of environment, interaction, and evolution. And Dr. Chan shares that this is an interactive and constructive mechanism. What's happening is we're creating these environments, and these environments are intentional, and these environments that we create are shaped by the values that we're speaking about today. Within that, we have children that are interacting with these environments. And through this interaction, there's this internal transformation that's happening with every person, resulting in this evolution of the child. And the same is for students, leaders, teachers, IEs, families, that we're all in this process of engaging in the environment that we're in. As we're interacting in this environment, that we're all being transformed. And this is really supported by research that has come from the Australian government, where they've looked into the development of a child's brain, and they've seen that it's not only genes, nor is it just environment, but it's this interaction of the child's genes and the environment that really shape who the child becomes. And it's really fascinating to think that the environment that we're in will ultimately determine who we become. What that leaves us with is this incredible responsibility to ensure that the environments that we're creating are intentional, are purposeful, are environments that best match our values and the high quality teaching and learning that we're looking for. Because as we have these environments and as we support the types of interactions that children and students and adults, that we're all being transformed constantly. And this is what learning is. For us, our specific curriculum approach, the way that we're reflecting on how we're creating these environments and how we're interacting, is shaped by a process of observation, reflection, and response. And this is in the early years. As we observe what is happening, the observations of children through a child-centered approach, we get to reflect as practitioners, and we get to reflect with students, and we get to respond. And we know from Albert Einstein that play is the highest form of research, and this is the vehicle that we want to have in our school environments to ensure that children have this as a mechanism for engaging in the environment as they interact in the environment, and leads to this transformation of the child. And you can see across our environments, I have a few examples here. We can see the type of interactions that are ongoing, that are happening with teachers and children. And as I go through some really quickly, is we have an example of a child who came into school and speaking about their experience of going to a coffee shop. And this coffee shop was Starbucks, and the teachers and the children, they partnered together to create a coffee shop environment in the classroom. And it really is a story which could be expanded upon as many different facets to how this developed. But this is all going through the process of observation, reflection, and response. And we have a look at hair salon, the experiences that children have had and how they bring those back in. Intentional learning that happens within the classroom, that covers from mathematics and different interests that have come through there, to social skills, to creativity, to artwork, to knowledge and understanding of the world, and personal, social, and emotional. There's so much language that happens in our classrooms. This example is from child and a couple of other children that were speaking about how their parents worked in an office and they wanted to see what that might look like in their context. The teachers collaborated with the children and they created this office environment within the classroom, and through that there was such deep learning as they interacted with this environment. And through this interaction, children are always getting changed internally, coming out with different thought processes, and ultimately learning is happening through this time. And you can see science experiments where children and teachers have reflected on what might be the strongest wind and come with different ideas of scientific experiments or construction, and fine motor development, documentation, which is visible throughout our classrooms. If we had the time to speak about the early childhood environments, that we could spend so much time just unpacking how each of these started, how they were developed, the partnership that's happening between teachers and children. And there really is a rich environment that is created through this observation, reflection, and response, an emergent curriculum approach that is central to the early years program at Yew Chung. Underpinning our cycle of observation, reflection, and response is intentionality with understanding every unique child in our program. Something which is really valuable and important to us at Yew Chung is data collection and understanding every child. Our teachers are constantly taking observations, they are understanding the unique child in the classroom, and we're looking at learning continuums, we're looking at early learning goals, and we're trying to understand where a child is at, where they've come from, and where they're going to. And through that process, we're able to respond individually, we're able to respond to groups of children, and ultimately we create this program where if you had to look at a house with deep foundations, we have an individual planning process that's supporting the individual child, and we're collecting those observations and we're putting that data together and reflecting on that to support that every child has a holistic foundation. But on top of that, we're also building this house which is going through this process of observation, reflection, and response that is partnering with children, and it's this emergent curriculum that's developing based on interests that might look different from class to class, but is creating this learning that is really rich and diversified, and we find that children are engaged in the process and that the learning is really authentic. And this really ties well into teachers and students construct learning together. And you can see in this photo, a teacher taking time to listen to the child, and as they're looking and reflecting together, children's ideas are brought into the classroom. And something which is so important is that when children are interested, feel involved, they feel the sense of connection, that the learning is so much deeper because children are part of the process. And that's something which is really important to us, ensuring that teachers and students are constructing learning together. And then value 8, students are self-directed and responsible learners. And we want to ensure that across our school and the culture that we're developing and the environments that we are being intentional about is that children are feeling as though they are responsible. We're creating opportunities for them, and you can see in these photos that children are here together. They are independently reflecting and thinking. There's a sense of responsibility, and this goes across into many different aspects. It might be the young child that is putting on their shoes by themselves and they're not getting helped in that process, but they're being supported and they're having the sense of, I can do these things. We're developing a growth mindset, responsible learners. Now, as we move across into the last of the 4 areas, we look at language. And language is focusing on students' mother tongue are fully respected and valued. Value 10, students are supported as emergent multilinguals. And then value 11, students use language to process both academic and social needs. And as we look at the first of those values, it's really important for us to understand that language is not only for learning, but it's actually about identity formation as well. As we support and value children's mother tongues, that we're supporting their sense of self, their sense of identity. We know that when children feel safe and secure, where they feel the sense of belonging, that they're really positioned to be able to engage in the learning process a lot better. When children don't have that sense of identity, that sense of self, we really are taking away an important part of who they are. Because it's through language that we're able to communicate, but language doesn't only communicate a message, language communicates culture. And we're really cognizant of that. And for us at Yew Chung, we really value the importance of mother tongues within our school environment and respecting and valuing those. And a conversation can be really extensive on this, what it looks like in the ECE, primary and secondary. And for us, in the early years, we take a lot of time to ensure that we are supporting every child as they come into our environment with primary care and supporting that child in feeling established, feeling understood in the environment with their mother tongue. And the same goes through, and we know that how in the older years, how the mother tongue is really instrumental in supporting teaching and learning as well. Students are supported as emergent multilinguals is our value number 10. And if we have a look at our mission, principles and practices, we know that we believe in equipping our graduates with a deep respect for and understanding of world cultures, mastery of Chinese and English, plus proficiency in other modern languages. We really value the East and the West. We really value and see the importance of mastery of both Chinese and English. And this is something that is intentional through our environments. You'll see that across all the age levels, that we're intentional about creating environments that can support children, whether they come in with Chinese as a mother tongue or English as a mother tongue or another language as a mother tongue, that we want to ensure that we are supporting and creating these environments that best supports children in mastery in Chinese and English. And we know that this is setting them up for a future in work environments where these two languages are really needed in the working world, and gives them great access to so many different opportunities for work, for being able to communicate with others, both with culture and communication. And for value 11, we look at students use language to process both academic and social needs. And we know that language it's so much more than just being able to express a concept, but in language, there's so many different nuances where fluency includes attitudes, gestures, expressions, movements, even mentalities. We know that sometimes when people are communicating in one language or the other, that they might come across slightly differently because there are so many nuances to languages, and we want to ensure that our children and students in our schools have both the academic skills and mastery of language to be able to use it in an academic context, but also in a social context where they're able to problem solve, where they're able to communicate a feeling behind the message, where they're able to be really strong at engaging with the people around them, not only from an academic perspective, but from a social perspective as well. And that really ties into the pinnacle of the 12 values, where we look at students becoming cross-cultural practitioners who act for a better world. And as we build upon who students are, who these children are that we're looking at, and the relationships that we're forming in our environment, and then the teaching and learning, we're building with the language, our intentionality with the language, we end up with a focus on developing children and students that become servant leaders who act for a better world. And back to the very beginning, where we looked at the logos of Nike or Adidas or Apple or Samsung, when we look at Yew Chung, we look at our logo, we know that there is significant intentionality in ensuring that we're all growing and developing around these 12 values that are giving us understanding of the type of culture, the type of environment that we're wanting to build and to develop. And it's been a great privilege to speak with you all this evening. I know that we've just touched the surface of a conversation which is much, much deeper, and a lot more time could be spent on each of these. And we have so many different examples of what these might look like in different parts of our school. But our goal this evening is just to give you a little bit of insight into what it is that is shaping our school environments. What are the things that we're looking at, and how we are being intentional in creating these environments, which ultimately become places that we're interacting with, which is leading to this internal transformation and this evolution of each of us, from teachers to students to family, as we're all a part of this learning community at Yew Chung. Thank you.
We hope you all enjoyed this presentation. We have received many good questions from our audience in the chat function on this platform, and we will put some of these questions to Clayton now to hear his thoughts. Okay, let's take a look at some of the questions we've received. All right, Clayton, we actually have quite a lot of questions. So here's the first one. It seems like you have a lot of schools in many places. Does every school have the same 12 values? What do you think?
That's a really great question. So we do have many different schools in our Yew Chung network, and these schools do go across many different cities. And what is really important to note is that the 12 values are really central to the focus that we have amongst all of our schools. We're all looking at the same values. We're all, while we might have slightly different student demographics from city to city, what is really important to note is that as a community, we are coming together, and that we're having conversations, and that we're looking at the same thing. And what's really interesting is that there have been some really fantastic conversations as we have worked together as a school community to continue to reflect on what are those things that are central to the type of environments that we're trying to create in Yew Chung. And those are the 12 values that we've spoken about. And families that are wanting to move between our schools, there is so much that is consistent. And I suppose I'll end this question on what I spoke about in my talk right at the beginning. If we had to bring up that image of our YCYW logo, the same as if you had to have a look at any other logo in the world, that there is a distinct feel, understanding of what we stand for and who we are as a school. And that is true for all of our schools that we have.
That's great, Clayton. Actually, when you're talking about the 12 values, the next question from a parent is also linking with that 12 values. She would like to find out that if there is any value, individual value, that is the most important amongst these 12 values.
Again, that's a thoughtful question, and I can see how that question could come across as thinking, is anyone more valuable than the other? And our answer really is not one is more valuable than the other, but the 12 values are in a pyramid, and you would have seen that pyramid shape. And what's really important to note is that they all are interconnected, they all lead into each other. So let's say, for example, we're thinking about teaching and learning. Now, if we haven't created a really strong foundation of who the child is, their identity, the lenses that we're looking through, or if we haven't really taken time to understand the relationships that we have within our organization, if we haven't established those as building blocks, we really aren't able to approach our teaching and learning in the way that we want to. So while not one is more important than the other, it's important that we build upon each other so that we can create this environment that we're wanting to create at Yew Chung Yuwa.
Thank you, Clayton. And you mentioned a lot about what we do in the school. So my next question is that from a parent, is that she said she has a 3-year-old that is often emotional and has meltdowns. I really want to know, she said, how to support him in these situations. So what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I wish we had a lot more time just to really unpack the differences between tantrums and meltdowns. And this conversation is a conversation that can really support families. We do a lot of workshops amongst our schools where we're able to give more information and we can really unpack the subject. Something which is really important for families to know is that this is really age appropriate. This is children that are trying to communicate how they're feeling, and they're wanting to share their thoughts with you. An example that comes out of Australia would be young children typically have around 1,000 words that they're able to understand. And they only have around 200 words that they can speak. And that's for a 3-year-old child. For a 2-year-old child, it might be half of that. And what is really interesting is that children are processing a lot more and that they're able to understand a lot more. But the frustration really comes in that they can't communicate with the people around them in the way that they're wanting to. Now, let's put that in the perspective of us as adults. So let's say that Carol here has gone down to Argentina and she's found this wonderful museum that she wants to go to. And it's a simple process. She needs to jump in a taxi, speak to the taxi driver who's going to take her from her hotel to the museum. But she gets in the taxi and Carol can only speak English and Chinese, and the taxi driver only speaks Spanish. So you can imagine this type of frustration that can start building up, because all that Carol wants to say is, can you please take me to this museum? And she doesn't have a phone, there's no way of translating, and she's trying to communicate. And you can imagine her hands being used, and she starts using her hands, and the taxi driver is also using his hands. And this is an illustration of what's happening in your house with your young child. Is they essentially are like the taxi driver and Carol, who are stuck without the vocabulary and the mechanism to be able to communicate well together. Your child has got so much more thinking that's happening, and they have so much more understanding, but they're limited in their ability to communicate. And what is really important about this is that we get to see our children slightly differently. If you get to see your child not as the young child that is trying to fight you, that is trying to make you frustrated, but rather a young child that's really torn between the conflict of them not being able to communicate well, And it's from this place that we're able to really engage in some of the tips that we hear from Janet Lansbury, Daniel Siegel, and a couple of others that we share more extensively about in other talks, where we're able to acknowledge feelings and to state what we see. And through some of these different tools, we're really able to support children in calming down, ensuring that that high cognition part of the brain is really working well. And from that place, as parents, supporting them to a place that they're able to try and get the language that they're wanting to use. It's a lovely conversation. It's a great question, and it's something that we can really dive much deeper into at any one of our other workshops that we have.
Right, thank you, Clayton. I think what you are saying is that we need to be on the same page with our children and also communicate with them in the language that they understand, and also allow them to have some time to express themselves. That's great. I hope this tip is really useful for some parents here. And also the next question is about EQ. In a sense, it's linked with your last question, that you mentioned Fortune 500 companies and the importance of emotional intelligence. How can we help our children to develop their EQs? This is actually one of the questions from a parent. So what do you think?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it really is such an important part and something that typically can be overlooked. You know, sometimes we can focus so much on other areas of development and forget that holistic development is really important. And that's something that is central to who we are as Yew Chung You Are. Something that we'd say to families is firstly to find out those things that are happening at school, the type of conversations and the skills that the teachers at your school are putting into practice. When there's consistency between home and school, it's really going to support the children in their overall development. And just really simply, some of the things that we use, some of those tools, is helping children to understand and identify, to use appropriate vocabulary to identify the types of feelings that they're feeling. You know, you could feel sad and happy, and sometimes people only are able to use these two very large terms to identify the many different types of feelings that we might feel. So to really break it down, you have this sort of unhappy feeling. Is it that you're feeling frustrated? Are you feeling anxious? Are you feeling scared? Helping children to be able to really pinpoint what it is that they're feeling. And it seems really simple, but through that research with those companies is something that is highlighted that not many people can actually do that. And the second part to it is, once you've been able to pinpoint what it is that you are feeling, what emotion that is identifying where that came from, and then also identifying and having strategies that you can use to help you get back to a place of equilibrium. So for some children, it might be that they need to go outside for a run around. For others, it might be listening to some music. For others, it might be going for a jog or cooking some food. There are many different strategies that we have. It could just be taking some deep breaths or speaking about it, drawing a picture. There are many, many different skills that we would support children in developing, and different strategies work for different children. And that's why every child is unique and different. And it's our responsibility to partner with families and children in helping them to understand what works best for them.
Thank you, Clayton. Our next question is, as a parent, how can I get more involved in the school? I think this is a very relevant question for all of us, is that we really value homeschool cooperation. So what's your thoughts on this, Clayton?
Yeah, it's really accurate. You know, working with families is central to all the work that we do. Parents are the child's first teacher, and working with parents as well as all people in the family, so grandparents who play a significant part, a significant role in the development of a child, as well as the IEs and the wider community that surrounds. And we really are open to families partnering. We have many different avenues for that. And it could be from class teachers that are always warm and welcoming and inviting teachers in, depending on the age group. In the early years, we have families that come into the classrooms and are a part of some of the work that we do and sharing their experiences and their skills. From the leadership team, we're hosting lots of different workshops, and we wanted to try and support parents in them understanding some of the things we're doing in the school so that they're able to do the same at home. You know, if children have consistency of home and school, it really supports them in having these constant messages. There's no confusion about what it is. They have the same environment, the same sort of boundaries and values that are coming in from all sides. And something else that is really an avenue which is of great support to us is our parent relations officers, and Carol works in that department for us in Hong Kong, and is really supportive in connecting with families and ensuring that the feedback is coming to us as a school, and we listening and we collaborating. And partnership with parents is really central to all the work that we do. So we also have workshops and fellowships and many different opportunities for families to get involved. So if there is any family that is not feeling connected, is not feeling that sense of belonging, that connection, that access to school, please reach out to teachers, leaders, parent relation officers. We're all here to support you, and we know the significance and the importance of having parents and the school partnering together. So we encourage you all, please reach out, and we'd love to continue to collaborate and to build together with you.
That's great, Clayton, thank you. As you mentioned, many students of our schools are bilingual speakers or multilingual, actually. So here's a question about how to support our children to use their mother tongue to improve their learning. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, you know, there's a myth that has really surrounded the use of mother tongue in schools, and the myth is that when we support children in their mother tongue, that it would take away from the language they're trying to learn. So let's say, for example, if we have Chinese-speaking children, the myth would be that if we've allowed them to speak Chinese in school, that they would not be benefiting, and that would really hinder their learning in English. And we know that that's not true. We know that children that are able to speak in their mother tongue in a school environment, a school that has been really intentional in setting up learning around this, it really helps children firstly to have a sense of belonging, to feel really safe, to feel valued in that environment. John Hattie, he does a lot of work on what it is that creates the best school environments for teaching and learning. And one of the most significant factors is ensuring that students feel safe and secure. And that's from the early years, where we have a primary care system, where we are supporting the youngest children right through to your secondary school students as well, that need to feel that sense of belonging, that sense of value, that sense of identity in the school environment. And from a teaching and learning perspective, and if I don't know if this is from an older years or not, but this, for any of our older years, what is really important to know is that a child might have significant understanding of any subject. Let's use a subject of water. They might know that water, the scientific terms surrounding water, they might know how it might be used in society, and they could have a really elaborate conversation in Chinese surrounding water. Now, when it comes to having that conversation in English, for example, they might only have one or two sentences. And if they're in a class full of English and Chinese native speakers, and some English students are sharing a great depth of knowledge about water in English, but the one child then comes in and they can only share a few sentences. We have a tendency sometimes to think, is it that the child doesn't have any understanding of water? Are they lacking knowledge? And you can see what this can do to a child, that they might think that the other students in the class think that they aren't very intelligent, that they haven't really learned, that they don't have much knowledge. But actually, if they were able to express that in Chinese, you would be able to see very quickly that they have a lot of knowledge, that they have a lot of conceptual understanding. So what we do in our classrooms, which is really important, is ensuring that we give opportunity to develop that self-identity. We give opportunities to really dive deep into making connections in our mother tongue, and then focusing on key vocabulary so that we can really communicate the thoughts and the thinking that we have into the world around us. So there's so much in this conversation. I know that we as a school have been working on bilingual, multilingual learners, and this again is a whole big subject that we could tap into. But for parents to know that mother tongues are important, to value the mother tongues, and to value that while they are still continuing to develop the mother tongue, that we can also develop the other languages that we're learning alongside that as well.
Okay, thank you, Clayton. Actually, I think we have limited time here, so we're going to go for our last question. One parent asked, so what is the difference between YCIS and other international schools? They all seem to be quite similar.
I shared it a little bit earlier, the different logos, and you would have seen a Nike and Adidas, or the Apple and Samsung, and you look at those logos, and let's put up Yew Chung beside that. And when you look at it, every single school has its own culture, own environment, and every organization does. There's something unique and distinct about every organization. For us at Yew Chung, these 12 values that we've been speaking about really ensure that we are intentional about the type of environments that we're creating for students that come into our school. There's something that we can really emphasize is that it can be really easy to focus on one of those areas. And I spoke about from the 12 values, students, relationships, teaching and learning, languages. Quite often a school could potentially focus on teaching and learning only. What we have done at Yew Chung, and which has been developed over many, many years, from our starting in 1932, right the way through, is holistic education. And you'll see that character formation is central to what we do. And we focus on ensuring that students are developing not only in their character formation, but in high expectations for teaching and learning, high quality teaching and learning, their languages, the best of the East and the West. And what you get by coming to Yew Chung is this environment where children are valued, where teachers are all looking through the same lenses, that they are capable, that they are unique, that they can be trusted, that there is a high quality of teaching and learning, and that children are going to be going through the system towards mastery in Chinese and English. I really feel that we have a fantastic organization that spans across many different cities, where we're all on the same page of finally looking at raising up servant leaders that act for a better world. And we invite all families, we could chat about this for a really long time, but to come and continue the conversation with us here at Yew Chung as we have a whole lot more to share about who we are as a school and as an organization.
I agree. Thank you, Clayton. Thank you very much for all your questions and comments in the chat room. That's all we have for this evening. If you still have questions about the Yew Chung approach to early childhood education and want to further explore the 12 values that underpin the culture and environments at YCYW, you can reach out to the early childhood teachers and leaders in your child's school. We have prepared some key takeaways from tonight's webinar, which we will post in the chat room, and these will also be sent out to parents by your child's school. Please also note that from tomorrow and for the next 2 weeks, you will be able to replay tonight's webinar using the same QR code and link that you used this evening. A special thank you to Mr. Clayton Mullins, our presenter this evening, for his visionary and in-depth presentation and for answering the questions from our community members. It certainly was a very enlightening topic. We invite you to attend the next edition of our parent webinar series on April the 21st. We'll be hearing from our senior curriculum officers, Ms. Bridget Yip and Dr. Long Tong Fei, on the topic of when East meets West, how a bilingual education benefits your child. We thank you for joining us and supporting our parent webinar series. We hope to see you at our next webinar. Have a good evening.